We're in the midst of an epidemic. It is one of such extreme self-abandonment. And I really want some moments with the person who has felt like life has dealt them one blow too many. I want to talk with that person. The person who has decided that and concluded that I cannot, I am a failure, I am a loser, I am a burden, I am a disappointment. I want to have a conversation with that person because that's a conversation I've been dancing with for several years now.
What do you want to say?
I want to say to that person, what is the narrative that you have decided that's true for you? And what lie have you velcroed onto your being, onto yourself? What story, because here's the thing, Vic, as an attorney, I know that we're taught, trained to believe that there's a perspective and every answer, it depends. But the lowest common denominator, I believe that a story has a truth and a lie. My lived experience and my observation has been that when we were children, we were so clear about our truth. And in somewhere along the way, living in that became unsafe. Somewhere along the way, you got disconnected and dislocated from that saving all my love for you. From that
To keeping all my love from you.
Yes.
Because I'm afraid you're going to hurt
Yes.
me and judge me and not see me.
Because someone did. Because you showed up and someone did hurt you.
Then you get to the point that you can't even see yourself.
That's exactly right.
You can't even see yourself.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So then you began to create, we create this narrative, this story, right? That we have decided, consciously, unconsciously, our brain decided this is what's going to keep me safe. So no matter what space I'm in, yes, at one point I knew I could sing. Yes, at one point I knew I could dance. Yes, at one point I knew I could write. Yes, at one point I had these dreams. This I'm talking about us collectively. But we decided to put that on the shelf and under lock and key because we dared believe that at 3, 4, 7, 12, what have you. And so we began to walk out of life that is not the truth.
So it's a perfect segue to a question I was going to ask you. And you say that at one point in our life, we dared believe the truth of who we are. And at some point, something comes in that questions us, how dare you believe or entertain such naivete, foolishness, ignorance, absurdity? And a conversation that we have had time and again is, what is that? What is that thing that says, how dare you believe that you have a contribution that's valuable? How dare you believe you have a place in this world? How dare you believe that these thoughts that you allow yourself to think are leading anywhere but a yellow brick road into the toilet? Ego. And we've had so many conversations about what ego really is that is so different from the narrative that has grown us. Most people that I know think ego means, I got this. You see how I look? You see what I got? You see how I walk? You see what I'm making? I'm good. What is ego?
So I believe that ego is that dynamic that shields us from the fear and insecurity that shows up in our life. And ego says, I'm going to protect you from that, right?
The vulnerability.
Absolutely.
I'm going to protect you from the experience of vulnerability.
That's exactly right. So it masks itself, in terms of what you just said. Do you see how I'm living?
As a confidant.
Right.
It's your best friend.
Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
I believe that we show up by telling our story, not selling our story. So you don't have to prove or say to anyone, here's how I'm living. You just show up in your greatness. You just show up in your genius. But when ego comes on the scene, now we feel like we have to create this facade and this persona to prove to people our worth. I would love to say that I always walk and move through life as this evolved Barbara. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is, we were talking about narrative earlier, right? If I think about when I was really free in Barbara, for as long as I can remember, literally, I naturally loved and gravitated to celebrating people. I have just an innate gift to experience someone's greatness and someone's genius and someone's beauty. And I can connect with that and celebrate that. But here's what happens when the lack of safety shows up. And here's how ego flips that. Sure, you can celebrate others, but don't you dare celebrate yourself. Sure, you can acknowledge the genius and greatness in others. So who you think you are, believing that you yourself
deserve
anything
at
all.
A Course in Miracles says the ego is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. It's that voice that says, and we've established, how dare you, who are you to think that you could be enough to serve, that you could be enough to lead, and really, that you could be enough to actually live out that vision that you have for yourself. So the truth of the matter is that being out of ego and being in humility truly means, who am I not to carry out what has been placed on my heart and in my mind to be while I'm in this body on this planet?
And do you know what's so beautiful about that, Vic?
Who am I not? Instead of who am I to think that I could be? Who am I not?
And if we stay right there, then we can just flow and be free in the who am I not. But when ego is showing up, we are constantly seeking validation. We are constantly seeking some kind of external confirmation.
Right.
Which is, the euphoria of that is so short-lived, because after 5 seconds of that, we go back to the place of not who am I not, but I am not. I am not deserving. I am not worthy.
So when we're looking outside of ourselves for definitions, you said validations, but really we're looking outside of ourselves for people to show up and tell us what we are so that we can know. But there's a place that you can be where you know for yourself. And you also know that when people show up and provide their input, that's more about them than it is about you.
When people show up and tell you who you are, and you already do not embrace that truth for yourself, remember you said about being suspicious, ego is suspicious, you're not going to believe them. Some of us even are challenged with even accepting that compliment or that observation or that truth, much less get into a place where we believe it.
We can't even entertain it.
We can't even entertain it.
And that's about ego.
That's exactly what ego is.
And that's the difference. Because everything that I was always taught about ego is when you're blown up. Ego is when you like yourself too much. Ego is when you're overinflated and overconfident and overempowered.
Yes.
Ego is actually that voice that keeps you small.
Playing small, diminutively small.
Right.
Yes.
And what does the ego have to gain by you playing small? Well, if you're playing small, then you're not playing your part.
Yes.
You're not doing what you're here and naturally wired to do, and you're not being who you're naturally wired to be. And so there's a part of humanity that decays as the result of you not being willing, because of ego and fear, to just simply show up and do and be who and what you're here to be.
Now, you're the host of this incredible conversation, but here's my question. Who modeled that for us? Who taught us that? Who shared, what class was that? Was that 7th grade? Was that middle high, junior high?
Well, I tell you what's really interesting is who modeled that for me, whose work, because I don't know this person personally, but whose work has shifted the course of my life. Just happens to be running for president.
Well, come on
Which
now.
is a really interesting thing to experience, knowing that I came to Marianne Williamson's work 20 years ago, and the world is coming to Marianne Williamson's message now.
Yes.
And what's really interesting also to me is that a lot of people, as the result of their ego being the lead lens of their perspective, they hear her message and they immediately discount her. How can someone show up in love and be powerful? How can someone show up in an intention to create something that works for everybody and be legitimate? I think the truth is love is our only hope, because we've seen how far and how grossly misplaced we've gotten as the result of being ego-driven, as the result of being a society and a world culture that is focused on external validation and force over power, and we're going to loop back to that. There's no love in that equation. Love is the only thing that actually has the power to flip this ship and keep it moving on a trajectory into something that is sustainable. But I don't think that people realize that. I think people think that there's a way that our brute force can save this. But the truth of the matter is, until we allow love to be the leading inspiration in our daily lives and to be the bottom line in our businesses and in our communities, the world simply doesn't work for everyone, and therefore the world simply doesn't work.
You say that people discount her message.
Not everyone.
No. I hear you, but I'm just.
I experience people discounting her message. Her message enabled me to have a concept of myself that has kept me alive.
May I request an invitation for you to get a tad bit more real right now?
Come on.
Because you said discount. I experience people's response as mocking her,
Oh, sure. She's a
denigrating
joke.
her.
She's a joke.
She's an absolute joke.
Right.
I heard that today on a news program, and I decided, Barbara, we're not going to inhale or any more toxicity from this moment on today, because of the mockery and the denigration of her love message. But my question is, what would be the antidote to what we're experiencing today if it's not love? What is the option? What is the other option? To me, that is the only option.
Well, I think a lot of people are convinced that the antidote is strategy. The antidote is...
Love can be strategic.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I think a lot of people are convinced that it's about figuring out how we can get the money moving in the right direction. And maybe that's really the truth, you know? Maybe it really is about getting the money moving more in the right direction, in a direction where more people have access to it.
And, I also think that it is, the people have a bastardized understanding or notion of what love is, right? We have this notion of love being this
Soft.
weak, soft, romantic.
Well, love is soft. Weak, that's a great word.
Right, yeah.
I think love can be soft.
It can be
in
soft.
a very strong way.
I think when I think of some of the greatest purveyors, as you may say, of love, whether it's Jesus or Buddhists, these were not weak brothers and women who truly truly embraced love. Harriet Tubman, it was love that gave her the courage and the boldness to do what she did. Only love could do that, right?
Oh, sure.
So,
But what would you say to people that would say that was defiance? That was arrogance?
I would say that is your ego screaming out and pushing back against the truth. I would ask that person, what have you experienced in your life for you to draw that conclusion? That someone who wants to help emancipate and free people from bondage, what would make you conclude that that was arrogance?
So are you suggesting that the position that we bring to a situation or the way that we perceive circumstances often has more to do with us than what we're looking at?
It has entirely to do with us. But what we do is we try to make other people responsible for how we show up, right? What I've done in my life is I try to make others responsible for how I show up or how I've shown up. You did this. You did that. Now, let me share a quick anecdote with you. You have a friend, girlfriend, Erica D. Jackson, Raleigh, North Carolina. She was pregnant and was planning a life with the father of the baby, who called her one day and said, "Hey, I'm planning a wedding." "Of course you are. We're planning a wedding." He was marrying someone else, right? The facts are they had a relationship, they got pregnant, he decided to marry someone else. Those are the facts. But what she made that story mean was, I am unlovable. I am unattractive. I am unworthy.
There's something wrong with me.
There's something wrong with me.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, at this point, I'll just say that a lesson that I have completely learned for sure and for certain in my life is that if someone is not able to uphold a commitment to you that they've made, that is never about you. Because your behavior never dictates their ability to uphold a commitment. That is never about you.
And in addition to that, what I find intriguing is, well, what is your commitment to you? Their commitment to you, as far as I'm concerned, is secondary. What is your commitment to you? Barbara, what is your commitment to you? How are you choosing to show up? And that may sound so lofty, but when you decide, I think I'm going to swallow this handful of pills, what am I deciding for myself? What conclusion am I making for myself that I've decided that's the option? Whomever I have decided to make responsible for that decision, at the end of the day, the pills could be all the things that I once knew myself to be. So it's not just Barbara's self, it's Barbara's self as interpreted by God. There's a spiritual being, that a spiritual dynamic that I believe for my life that has snatched me out of the throes of some various dangerous decisions that I was in the process of making. Partly because I was relying on self, and I had a jacked up concept of what self meant. Right?
So what does self mean?
I had embraced and signed up and on the dotted line for the lie.
That you were the degree and the hair
Well, okay, so I'm gonna need you not to hair on the hair, baby.
No, see what you have the hair.
But I am not.
See
the
what I'm
hair.
saying?
Exactly. And
Now,
that doesn't have me.
You have the hair.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
Yes.
But I think even more importantly for me,
Yes.
whenever that was, I decided that I am unworthy. That was full stop. I am unworthy. So that's why I could be a domestic violence advocate while I'm in a domestic violence relationship.
What's really interesting to me in what you just said is we decide for ourselves that we're unworthy based on any number of curricula or criteria that we decide to entertain. Why do we not realize that we can decide for ourselves we are worthy for just the same random
Well,
reasoning?
how do we get the power? How are we emboldened to make such a decision?
Well, it's about flipping it, and it's about ego domination. If ego is driving us and we don't realize it, then we are, of course, going to be more inclined to the I am not worthy, I am not this, because ego is that small voice that says, how dare you believe that you could?
How do we learn that?
How do we learn that?
Yes.
We hopefully at some point along the way are privy to the suggestion
Yes.
that it's not the way that we've always thought it was, or that maybe it could be different, or we could feel different. And then we start to entertain for ourselves the notion of thinking different and framing things different and perceiving differently. And then we start to feel it in our body. The difference in embodying positive energy as the result of constructive thought as opposed to negative energy as the result of negating thought.
And that is why conversations like this,
Yes.
I believe, are pivotal to address the epidemic.
Yes, and that's how you come to know that you know that you know. Now, because you and I have had more hours of conversation almost than I've had with God, because we tend to go and go and go and go, there was something that we said in a conversation that has not left me, and that is when I hear with my ego, I'm hearing with my wounds. My wounds are actually hearing. When I heal those wounds, I begin to hear with my heart.
Yes.
Right? And so we were talking about when you are in a place that you have done your work and you have healed your wounds, that you've taken 100% responsibility for having, no matter who inflicted them upon you.
Yes, yes.
Then somebody can bring you some bullshit and you can digest that into a place that you find love in that bullshit. We can turn anything into something that works or hurts.
That works or hurts. Love that. You just said something that I thought was very pivotal in terms of the awareness. You know, on the red carpet, there's stop and repeat when you're walking down. I have shared with clients the value of stop and disrupt in terms of
that narrative.
and those thoughts.
And that's the only way you ever win.
Right. And
that's the only way you're ever
look
free.
a number of ways.
Yep.
But be aware enough to stop and disrupt.
Yep. Everybody has the narrative.
Yes.
Not everybody lets it play.
There will always be invitations and opportunities to surrender and give up. But they need not be for the length of time. I was a master isolationist, right? Don't look at me like that, like you know me. There were 3.5 months when I was in a space of an invitation-only facility where I had surrendered under the weight of unhealed trauma, depression, PTSD. But when I look at photos of myself right before that pivotal decline, you never know. Oh, I was radiant.
The
And
posture.
The posture.
The persona.
The persona,
So
the
developed.
facade. Oh,
So
what?
developed.
What? Yes. And I had no idea at the time that I was self-abandoning. But now when you mention awareness, if I were in a practice of awareness, I would have been able to check in as I do now. Barbara, who's showing up? Barbara, what are you feeling right now?
Is it you?
Yes.
As in, is it love or is it ego?
Yes.
As in fear.
Yes. As in the wounds, as in the unhealedness.
And we have the choice in any given moment to choose, does love respond?
Yes.
Or does fear, aka any other form of negativity, respond?
And in those moments when we choose fear,
Yeah.
when we get back to center, what we need not do is self-condemn and fall into this abyss of, see, no matter how hard I try. Do you know one of the greatest lessons I have learned from you, Vic? The gift of grace and forgiving self. There have been moments when I reflect on our conversations about grace and self-forgiveness, and I have literally wept because it's been so transforming. And the depth of love that you would the space of love that you would have to be in to share that for me. And you knew in those moments that, Barb, I know it's hard for you to receive that right now, but just trust me, just be with that. It's changed my life to the extent that now I can model that for my daughters and for others. That no matter what, grace and forgiving self. Yes, you made that decision. Forgive self. Yes, that happened to you. There's enough grace that will move you through that.
Well, what you've done is done. Now, what is the best decision you can make in this moment?
Yes.
And the best decision is never guilt. The best decision is never shame.
That's so good.
The best decision
that's
is
so good.
never condemnation of anyone or yourself. The best decision is always, thank you, Jory Martinez Woods, how can I love myself more in this moment? How can I make more love
Yes.
out of what I've just done
Yes.
than what I made in that moment
Yes.
when I fucked it up but good,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
How can I make love now? Because the guilt, the shame, the condemnation, it's all optional.
Come on.
It's all optional. And it's also completely self-defeating, disenabling, unnecessary. Yes, remorse, but the best way to show remorse is to show love now. You can never negate the power of a present moment positive contribution because of a negative contribution in the past. In other words, just because you messed it up in the past doesn't mean that you cannot redeem it right now. Does not mean that you don't have something good to give today. Just because you didn't realize you had something good to give or you didn't choose to give something good a few days ago, you can still give something good today.
You know, the royalty that Maya Angelou still represents for
Absolutely.
me. When we know better, we do better.
When we learn, we teach,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
we've been talking recently, as a matter of fact, you know, it's on my Facebook wall because it's so important to me to stay conscious of the concept that we have two options, evolve or repeat.
Come on.
Evolve
Yes.
or repeat.
Yes.
And life is so amazing that it is set up such that
That's so good.
it enables us to choose what we will have now based on what we have learned or not. In other words, if we haven't learned it yet, it'll bring it around again. It might have a different face or a different dress
Truth.
or a bigger ass.
Facts. Yes.
But we're going to learn that same lesson
Yes.
no matter what until we've learned it. And once we've learned it, then we show up a different way in the world such that when that lesson comes to us again with a different face, we cross the street because we learned that. We're good. Life is delicious that way. It is set up for us. It is set up for us, literally.
You know, the Bible, there's a scripture in the Bible. I do not know the address. Forgive me. What fellowship can there be between darkness and light? None. So, as you said, when darkness shows up, once you've chosen the path of light, thank you.
Darkness of itself doesn't exist. Darkness is merely the absence of light. Darkness is what you have without the light. But once you turn the light on, there can be no darkness. So therefore,
even that is a choice.
sure.
Even
And
that
so
is a choice.
therefore what ends up happening is we walk in darkness until we realize the light of love, the light of clarity, the light of optional perception.
Until we realize that we are the light. We are the light.
So if we are the light and we're walking in darkness, how can that be?
And this is how we end up in those spaces of spiraling, because they cannot coexist. It cannot coexist.
Our thoughts about who we are enable us to be light, walking in darkness. If we are light, entertaining dark thoughts, we're in darkness.
Just even hearing that, right now I'm feeling the burden of that in my body. Just hearing that and remembering that that was once my path.
Tell me about your path now.
I've signed a new contract where I've decided that, Barbara, you are, first and foremost, you are worthy. I went back to basically the drawing board and said, what is going to be your practice?
Yeah.
Right? And just one, there's an African proverb, tiny drops of water make a mighty ocean. So a lot of times we decide, all right, I'm going to redesign and remake everything. All right, it's cute. And it'll be over in about 15 seconds. So let's do this. Let's make small decisions, micro goals, and make it a practice. So for example, I literally used to wake up and turn on the news. I used to go to bed listening to the news. I used to wake up turning the news, listening to the news. I have decided that I want to book in my days with sanctuary. I want to drift into slumber with beauty and reflection and joy and yumminess. And I want to wake up in the same spirit.
You deserve it. You deserve it. You've realized that.
Once I decided I was worthy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the most powerful shifts in my life that happened, is when I realized that worthiness is never about the achievement of anything. It's never about qualifiers. It's about simply realizing and deciding that worthiness is a concept. Worthiness is a decision that we either allow or we disallow based on whether we've realized it or not.
I want to circle back to the package, our packaging. There are moments when I ask myself, Barbara, who are you being? Who am I being without all the accolades, the this and the that, and who are you being in this moment? And are you good with who that is? Are you good with her? Are you good with that? Can you look that person in the eyes in the mirror and say, I dig you, no matter what? And one of the shifts in my life is more and more often, the answer is hell yeah. Yes, I do.
When you can look in a mirror and you can say, without allowing yourself to believe that it's stupid, without putting the mirror down, without pulling away, without closing, I love you, I see you, and I'm committed to doing everything I can to allow your dreams to come true. You're on the precipice of everything that you've ever conceived you could be. But you have to be able to do that.
I've referenced earlier that I was a domestic violence advocate.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of several of my clients, whether they were physicians who had been invited to the Obama White House, whether they were nationally renowned stylists, whether they were homemakers. One of the experiences that I would say I invited them to, but see, they didn't really have a whole lot of option not to, is I would ask them to look in the mirror in my office. And I would ask them to say to that person something beautiful and affirming. Now, remember I said physicians, national artists, homemakers, teachers, and the challenge that they would have to be able to do that. You know, you have your last name and the comma and all those letters after it.
Well, I couldn't do it on the first time I tried.
Nor could I.
I couldn't do it on the second time I tried.
Nor could I.
But by God, I kept trying.
Yes.
Because somebody
Yes.
convinced me that there was something there beyond my resistance. And learning that lesson, that when resistance appears, continue to press forward. Because resistance is always the gateway to more.
And what was that resistance?
Well, it depends, right? In that moment, I think the resistance that I experienced when I picked the mirror up and I tried to say that the first time, the resistance I experienced was ego. It was the ego that I had let, and unknowingly, because I didn't know what ego was. I had a different concept of ego then. But all my life, I had let ego convince me I'm nobody special. That was my narrative.
So you look in the mirror.
So I look in the mirror and I try to say that to that person.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yep.
But once I realized that that resistance and that ego is my choice, and I'm choosing that, if I'm allowing that. If I'm allowing those thoughts to be true, then I'm literally choosing that for my experience. And the power of choice and the ability to focus are the two greatest powers we have as human beings. The power to choose and the ability to focus. And if we can choose an enabling thought and we can focus on that thought long enough, we can bring that into our experience of reality.
Vic, may I ask you a question? Is that okay? Is that allowed? Would you believe it if I told you that someone is alive today because they encountered you?
Yes, because I know for sure that I'm alive today because I encountered someone. And that's another beautiful way that this life is set up. And I'm honored to be a part of that that process. That one piece is no greater and no lesser than the other. That we're all here as individual expressions of the one. Individual, unique expressions of the one. And that's why value is a human construct, right? We're all valuable. It can't change.
Yes.
A lot of times we believe that value changes depending on how much money we can generate by what we're able to do when we get up and put our pants on in the morning.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is, ultimately speaking, value was the same when we were an infant in a blanket as it is when we're in a coffin on the way to wherever we're going to go, if we're in a coffin or a casket or wherever we might be, a shroud, you know. We're all the same when it comes to that concept of worth. But whether or not we get that depends on the experience that we will then go out and create for ourselves.
Intrinsic value is a spiritual construct, but all this extra is the human construct. Where'd you go to school? What degree do you have? What's your zip code? How much do you weigh? How many comments do you have in your salary? That's the human construct, right? And as we were discussing earlier, that value, as it resonates for me, is a tributary of sorts of ego. But intrinsic value is when God says and whispers to us all day, I love you. I made you in my image. You are all things superlative, all things genius, all things greatness.
It's ego that would have us believe that if I go out here today and I make more money today than I did yesterday, then I'm more valuable.
Then I'm more valuable.
Right?
Yes.
It's the lack of ego
Yes.
the departure from ego that enables us to believe my contribution is as important as anybody's contribution.
exactly right.
And I got to be about the business of making it, because I got to make sure my drop of water is in that bucket, because that's my opportunity to experience wholeness, to experience fulfillment. And that's the world's opportunity to experience me.
And ultimate freedom. You are no longer in bondage, because now I can experience Vic, the true Vic, right? You can experience the true Barbara. We can experience people in their truth and not people in their package.
What's true for you?
First and foremost, it is I am unmistakably and unshakably clear that I am worthy, I am love, and I am light. I'm clear about it.
And therefore, what can you do now that you may not have been able to do before you had that realization and before you embodied that realization? Because let's be very clear, it's a very different thing from having that thought in your head to having that experience in your cells.
There's a very real likelihood that you would have gotten a text today around 5:20. Hey, I know I said I was going to be there, but I'm really not going to be able to. Now I can show up.
Stop. Because that's all that matters. If you can show up, I can show up.
Yes, I show up because you show up.
Thank you. I love you.